Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Rookie Superflex Mock Draft. Everybody's been drafted in the NFL draft, so we finally know where all these players play, and it changes our rankings pretty drastically. So we conducted a 2-round Superflex Rookie Mock Draft for you guys. We're going to do this in 2 different shows, round 1 and round 2. This is round 1. We're going to talk about the good picks and the bad picks. Some of these guys here with me have made some good picks. Some of them may have made some bad picks. And somebody already knows where they did it. So I am Rich Dotson, one of the founders of dynastynerds.com, here with my fellow nerds, Nick Whalen.
Hey, how's it going?
Garrett Price.
What's up, buddy?
And another co-founder, Matt O'Hara.
Hey, man. How you doing?
Doing good, guys. So this is a Superflex mock draft. If you don't know what a Superflex league is, it is where you start 2 quarterbacks, which increases the value of a quarterback tremendously. Anytime you're in a position to grab a quarterback, you want to do so because those young quarterbacks are worth their weight in gold. So, of course, we're going to kick off this mock draft. Our writer, Don Mitchell, had the number 1 pick in this draft, and he selected Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. I love this pick right now. I think he's a consensus amongst all 4 of us as the number 1 overall player in this rookie mock draft. Joe Burrow, the number 1 selection in NFL draft, coming off one of the most spectacular college seasons we have ever seen, topping off with the national championship. He brings accuracy, a good arm, smarts, some of the best pocket presence I've seen out of a rookie in a very long time. I've had the number 1 pick in a Superflex rookie mock draft already, and I took Joe Burrow. I don't know about you guys, but I think this is a very easy pick. Garrett, what do you think about Joe Burrow at 1?
I think he has to be the number 1 pick. Regardless if you need a quarterback or not, you take Joe Burrow here because in Superflex leagues, if you're new to Superflex, the value of a quarterback in Superflex is very similar to the value of a running back in 1 QB leagues, where their value is the cheapest on draft day. Because after the draft, all of a sudden their value continues to rise and rise and rise. And if you want an elite quarterback, you're going to have to pay 3 first-round picks to try to get an elite guy. And this is closest we've had to a guy that we really, truly feel like will be an elite producer for a long time. So I think you have to go Joe Burrow here. For some reason, if you're just absolutely stacked at quarterback, then trade out of the pick or something because I don't. For me, it is not justifiable to not take Joe Burrow at 1.
Nick, 10 out of 10 times, are you taking Joe Burrow at 1-1?
No, I actually like the second pick here more, but still at quarterback because it's, super flex.
Matt, 10 out of 10 times, are you going Joe Burrow?
I'm going Joe Burrow 10 out of 10 times. And you know what Garrett didn't mention is the quarterbacks are much like running backs as far as value, but they're such a long-term commodity that they're worth so much more than a normal running back. They kind of churn through every couple of years. If you hit on a quarterback, he can literally carry your team for the next 10 years. So they're really, really useful, and they're really, really long-term compared to a running back. So, yeah, I love Joe Burrow. I love the production coming out of college. I mean, you don't see too many quarterbacks that are throwing, 60 touchdowns. Love the production, love the accuracy, which is really the most important thing when you're breaking down quarterbacks. So definitely love Joe Burrow as the number 1 guy.
Yeah, like Matt said, it's the longevity of the position that even makes it more so valuable. Having Pat Mahomes, and the reason Pat Mahomes would go 1-1 in a Superflex startup is simply for the fact he's in his young 20s and that he's going to be on your roster for more than a decade. In 10 years, when you say it's like, it's 10 years, that's a lifetime in fantasy football. In one of my oldest leagues, I've had 1 starting quarterback the entire time, and that's Drew Brees. For 17 years, I've had Drew Brees as my starting quarterback. And it just puts me in a position year in, year out, not having to worry about that roster need. And that's what you hope you're going to get here with Joe Burrow at your quarterback. Goes into already not a terrible situation with Joe Mixon there. He's got A.J. Green. They bring in T. Higgins. They have Tyler Boyd as well. So this is a good spot for him right out of the gate with the weapons he has around him. So Joe Burrow right now is 3 out of 4 consensus, 1-1. We'll see what Nick thinks of here next. Like in most Superflex mock drafts or real drafts that you'll see, Jared Wackerly on the clock at 2. This looks like a pretty easy pick for him. It was. He takes Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins. Nick, tell everybody why this is such a fantastic choice, because he's obviously your 1-1. Tell the people why.
Yeah, I just like his game more than Joe Burrow. I mean, he's a player that has done it for a longer period of time, He's a quick processor, which is the most important trait for a quarterback because you're going to have different blitzes and stunts and coverages and players rotating that you have to process a lot and then deliver the football without getting sacked and not throwing interceptions, things like that. And he does that really well. But he also is aggressive. He's not someone that's just going to check it down when something's not there. He's going to try and throw for first downs. I mean, even when they played LSU, which is where Joe Burrow was last year, they were down late in that game. And when he had a shot right away, he threw a bomb in a one-on-one situation to Devontae Smith, and they scored an 80-yard touchdown. So he's going to try and will his team back into games as well. And in fantasy football, you want an aggressive quarterback. Those guys are going to score you points, not the Alex Smiths of the world. They're going to check it down. So when you have a talented guy that processes information quickly, he's accurate, and he's aggressive, that's a guy that's going to put up a lot of points in fantasy.
So I understand Tua going here 2-2 every time, but aren't you a little bit worried? We mentioned longevity here. You know, Burrow looked really good with that hip injury to Tua. That was a major trauma injury, not just some casual injury, having some kind of long-term effect on him. He's had 2 different ankle foot surgeries already as well. He's not over that big. He's not a big quarterback, right around like 6 foot, 6'1". You're not worried about that long-term longevity of that quarterback position for Tua at all, Nick?
Well, I mean, if we're just comparing the two, Joe Burrow's done it for 1 year. 2 years ago, he was not even an NFL player. And in comes this new system, in comes all these great weapons, and all of a sudden he's the best thing ever. And Tua's done it for, 2 seasons. We want to say 2 full seasons if you want to average it all out, part of his freshman year. So we have a bigger sample size. So I would rather take a bigger sample size and a better player than the injury concerns, which they could come and go. I only knew of 1 surgery. I thought it was just a high ankle sprain, a knee sprain, and then he broke like a finger, I thought.
I believe he had 2 surgeries.
The hip.
Well, Nick likes the bigger sample size. He's the guy that goes to the mall and walks around continuously in the circle, get those free pieces of chicken on the toothpick for Nick. Matt, you liked, I know you made a trade today. I saw you moved up big time, gave up a 2021 first. To make sure you got to a TAGOVILOA. This is the right choice for you as well, Tua here at 2.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think the differentiator for me is the fact that Tua is a little bit smaller of a guy, and the injury concerns, there's just a little bit of uncertainty surrounding all of it this year. I mean, I know he got a medical recheck and blah, 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 but we didn't get to see him work out. No one got to see him post-surgery and post-clearing or anything like that actually do anything. So there's just a smidge in the back of my mind, just a little bit of trepidation back there, which is what is going to keep him behind Joe Burrow for me. But I really do like him. I like his game. He's obviously one of the most accurate guys as well. He can get rid of the ball really quickly. And like Nick said, he processes information pretty well as also. So number 2 is definitely, I couldn't see him going farther down than that in many drafts without me trying to scoop up and get him, which is exactly what happened in our draft today. He started sliding and it got to number 4 and he hadn't been picked yet. I was way back at number 9 and I made a move all the way up to number 4 to get him just because I thought that was crazy value. There's no way that he should be sliding to number 4 in anybody's draft.
Yeah, Matt, you're aggressive there, giving up your 21 first, which is a strong class as well. But like I said earlier in the beginning of the show, anytime you have an opportunity to grab one of these young quarterbacks, definitely a high upside prospect, you have to do it because it's going to pay dividends in the long run, whether it be trade value down the road or just to help your team win. And Gary, this is your number 2 player on your board as well. I know that.
Yeah, absolutely. He's my number 2 guy. I share some of the same concerns that you guys have. Had it been not for the injury, we talked about this on the podcast before, had it been not for the injury, it would have been very close, and I might have had Tua over. But that was enough to drop me down. We also see that NFL teams valued that the same as well. And quarterback is one of the most difficult positions to evaluate. A lot of times it's pretty safe to trust the NFL evaluators on that more than I trust myself evaluating quarterbacks. And so, I feel much better scouting the running backs, the wide receivers. The quarterback is such a heady between the ears position that I lean on them more than anything. So I have no problem scooping up Tua at 2. I think the value is great there. Like it happened with Matt, there's quite a few leagues where he's not the second off the board, which has been very surprising for me. I've seen that in quite a few leagues where he's slipped to 3, 4, 5. And I got him in the UDPL league at 4, and I was absolutely thrilled because I needed a quarterback. But even if I didn't, I still think that's crazy good value.
Yeah, it's just one of those situations. Everybody has those league mates, right, where they just kind of don't know what they're doing, kind of go against the grain. They just want to get the guys they want. They don't even care about rankings or value. They're like, I want Jerry Jeudy. He's just my favorite wide receiver. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm a Broncos fan. I'm going to take him here at 1-1 in a super flex. I don't care what you think. So you're right. This is a great pick. It's not Nick's pick because Nick has 2-1, but it's not the first time Nick has been wrong because Nick finds himself on the clock right here. And our friend Nick Whalen selects Jonathan Taylor, running back for the Colts. So before we get into this, let Nick explain himself first of why he took Jonathan Taylor, why he thinks our viewers should take Jonathan Taylor. And then if one of you guys or myself, we could say, hey, I kind of greatly disagree. Nick, tell people why that you took Jonathan Taylor at number 3 here.
I just freaked out and just took him on accident.
I'm a big Colts fan.
I get so nervous when I'm on the clock.
Yeah.
I'm so sweaty.
I just really like the landing spot. I think, my comp for him has always been a Nick Chubb-like player. And I don't think he's going to catch 50, 60, 70 receptions like some of these other backs. But he's going to have a floor, I think, of 1,200 rushing yards a year, which is similar to what I think Chubb's going to do. And when he's behind Quentin Nelson and that amazing offensive line, I mean, they've been ranked 3rd in PFF rankings each of the last 2 years. And when you do that, and Marlon Mack has been relevant, and Marlon Mack's not even close to the same player as Jonathan Taylor. He's worked on his receiving ability. And with his rushing style as well, he's a player, and me and Garrett have talked about this on different podcasts, where he needs to have a good offensive line because his designed hole is where he cuts off. Similar to Adrian Peterson. He's not going to cut it all the way back across the grain and be super dynamic and creative behind the line. He's going to go to the designed hole and then try and get downhill really quickly. And with a good offensive line, there's going to be a hole there most of the time. And this is a really, really ideal situation. So for me, this is a safer pick than some other options that Rich might be wrong about. And I think that when you pair that with, I don't think the division's going to be super good long-term. I think that it's a really, really good situation for him to be ahead in games, close out games, and get lots of yards and points.
Yeah, I think this is a really great situation for Jonathan Taylor. Absolutely fantastic. Couldn't find a better landing spot for Jonathan Taylor. But I tell you what, you could find a better landing spot for another player, and that's Clyde Edwards-Helaire for the Kansas City Chiefs. So not only would I have taken Jonathan Taylor here, I would have taken, he's not my number 1 running back. And you mentioned he's a floor 1,200-yard rushing guy, but we all our leagues are PPR leagues. So even though that floor, let's take his floor and bump it up a notch and say he's that league leading rusher like Derrick Henry last year. But where was Derrick Henry's biggest hamstring? It was he didn't catch footballs like Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor has a 16% drop rate in the passing game. He's not going to catch a lot of footballs out there. I think he's the best pure runner in this class. I love his 3rd-ranked offensive line, even though J.K. Dobbins went behind the 2nd-ranked offensive line. But he's not going to catch footballs. Even when Derrick Henry led the league in rushing and had one of the best years he could possibly have, he was still running back 7 on the year. In PPR leagues, you got to get that stability. So if you look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Nick, and you just take his total yardage, say he catches about 700 yards, 800 yards, and rushes for 900, he's at 1,600 yards without those PPR reception points, which could probably be right around in that 60 to 80 range, which is going to vault him up to that running back 4. We're going to wait to talk about Clyde Edwards. Again, I'm happy with any of these running backs. I think my biggest beef here would be just not taking Justin Herbert because like we said, getting those running backs, I think if Justin Herbert pans out, you can get a better running back than Jonathan Taylor. You can get a proven guy that's going to be top 6, top 5, where I like Jonathan Taylor. I just think he's always going to be right around running back 8, running back 9. Maybe if he scores enough touchdowns, he could get that running back 3, 4. But without that pass catching ability, that worries me a little bit some. On top of his fumbling rate, where he did that consistently in Wisconsin. I remember watching a Purdue game where he fumbled twice, and one of the times nobody even touched the guy. Matt, what do you think about Nick taking Jonathan Taylor here?
Can I rebuttal this?
At 3.
God, let the guy rebuttal, Rich. No,
I won't let you rebuttal, Nick.
I thought it was a little bit high for me. Obviously, I love the spot as well. The offensive line there is amazing. I don't want to beat the dead horse here and say all the same things, but it's a little bit high for me. I'm with you as far as I have Clyde Edwards-Helaire higher than him. I actually have J.K. Dobbins higher than him as well. So it wouldn't be my pick, but go ahead, Nick, get your rebuttal in.
Yeah, so just like the debate we had with Burrow and with Tua, my philosophy is I want to have players with a bigger sample size. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was in my first tier, I was fairly alone. I think not most people had him in their top tier of players prior to the draft, is a guy that I like. But he's done it for 1 year at LSU with elite production. And he's knocked out of some games. Jonathan Taylor didn't miss a game in college. So when you want to combine a couple of things there, when you're worried with the Derrick Henry RB7 or the RB9 range, that's pretty safe. I mean, can you guys really see a lot of likely scenarios where Taylor's out of the top 12 running backs, 14, 15 running backs in any year?
Maybe if he doesn't score a lot of touchdowns, these PPR guys get a bump. And you mentioned the word safe, though, Nick, I think Clyde Edwards' pass catching ability is where he gets that safety net from. Like, can we all agree that Clyde Edwards is probably one of the best pass catching running backs in this class?
Oh, he is. Him and Swift.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, and I know it is you're right, it's a small sample size, but that sample size was a beautiful size. And if Andy Reid, who's consistently got high production out of these running backs, any running back, I mean, he made Damian Williams, of all people, get drafted 55 rounds in a 30-round mock draft higher than he should have got drafted. So for me, look what he did with Kareem Hunt his rookie year coming out of Toledo. He had 1,300 yards rushing. And this is before Pat Mahomes was MVP and Super Bowl champion and Tyreek Hill was the GOAT. So even before that, Kareem Hunt in that offense rushed for 1,300 yards. He had 50 receptions for 500 yards or 30 receptions for 500 yards, had 11 total touchdowns, which is like running back 4 on the year. And Clyde Edwards can be equal to Kareem Hunt. Again, it's not always about, is this player that good? I think we've said this before in a podcast and on the show is Alvin Kamara the best pure runner in the class? Absolutely not. Jonathan Taylor is the best pure runner in this class, 100%. But Alvin Kamara is in the best scheme and the best system to optimize his skill set, which makes him a first-round dynasty startup player. That's the difference. I'm not looking for the best running back. I'm looking for the player that's going to score me the most fantasy points, and I think that's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But even got going there, we're arguing with running backs here, Nick, is I still would have taken Justin Herbert, but that's neither here nor there. Garrett, what do you think of Nick's terrible pick?
I was worried you weren't going to let me talk about this at all because
thanks, Garrett, for chiming in. We're going to move.
I'm with Nick on this. I'm with Nick. Jonathan Taylor did end up as my RB1. Now, it's truly, truly splitting hairs. I literally put all of 3 of these guys, including Dobbins, all 3 of them back to back to back in my overall rankings. I mean, they are literally all that close. They all landed in the perfect spot for their specific skill sets. And that was my thing. Jonathan Taylor was my RB3 before this. But I said, if he ends up in San Francisco or if he ends up with the Colts, he'll probably move to my RB1. And that's exactly what happened. He did move up to my RB1. And the other thing is, we're talking about Taylor like there's no chance he will ever develop in the passing game. You know, we've seen this out of Wisconsin backs before where they just really aren't used in the passing game. So I'm not saying he will because if he stays as is, he's pretty safe as a top 12 guy. But I think the reason they drafted him is they do view him as a guy that could be on the field for all 3 downs because Marlon Mack was fine between the tackles. He just didn't really have anything else. So I think they view this as a guy that could potentially develop into that, just like Melvin Gordon did. James White's one of the best pass catching backs in the league, and he wasn't used like that in Wisconsin. So I'm not saying he can do it, but I'm saying even if he doesn't develop that, he's still an RB1. If he does develop into even a 40 or 50 catch guy, all of a sudden we are talking about that top 5 running back range.
Yeah, but he doesn't run out. So you're talking about manufactured touches and receptions, kind of like Leonard Fournette last year in Jacksonville, which isn't really overly sustainable. Again, I wouldn't be overly concerned about it if his drop rate wasn't so high when he was actually utilized in the passing game. If his efficiency in the passing game was, there. Like DeAndre Swift didn't have a high production in the passing game, but he was very efficient when he was utilized, where Jonathan Taylor just wasn't efficient even when called upon. So, but you're right, Garrett, we're splitting hairs because I love Jonathan Taylor too. In non-Superflex, he's my 1-2. Probably bump it after this conversation because I'm getting so hyped up about it to my 1-3 behind J.K. Dobbins. But again, we're splitting hairs. Like, The fact if you get any 4 of these top-end running backs, you could throw Cam Akers in as 5 of them, your dynasty team is better because of it. We're going to move on to the number 4 overall pick, and that is going to be Nate Christian. He selects J.K. Dobbins for the Baltimore Ravens. I love this pick. It's amazing how besides DeAndre Swift, how many of these running backs landed in such a perfect situation. And you couldn't pick a better situation than the Baltimore Ravens for J.K. Dobbins. This is Matt's number 2 overall running back. Matt, tell the viewers why this is such a great pick to get him here. Again, he took him over Clyde Edwards. It's like we said, we're splitting hairs. We know which way he split his hairs. Tell us how you part the hairs, Matt.
I just use a comb most of the time, but on this particular instance, obviously I love the landing spot. You know, the Ravens, all they want to do is run the ball. And yes, obviously Mark Ingram is there, but that's going to be a very short-term thing. Mark Ingram's, I think, 30 now, and he's going to be 31, I think, coming up here by the end of the season. It's a very short-term thing where him and Mark Ingram are going to be splitting carries. We talked about it the other day on the podcast, and Garrett brought up the fact that, you know, the one knock about J.K. Dobbins was the fact that people were saying the sky is the limit for this guy, and that's why I kept him at number 2. It is totally splitting hairs between him and Jonathan Taylor, but that's what we're here to do. We're here to split the hairs, and I have J.K. Dobbins slightly ahead of him.
J.K. Dobbins is viable in the passing game, and you're right, Matt. Not only does he go to a team with the second highest graded offensive line per Pro Football Focus, but also the number 1 rushing team in the NFL. That is their identity. It will open up tons of things for J.K. Dobbins. Nick, what do you think of J.K. Dobbins here?
Yeah, he's my RB4. And there's some things I think that people don't talk about with this situation. Yeah, I agree. Lamar Jackson is a great runner. That can help open up holes. It helped with Ingram. It helped with Gus Edwards. We're not talking about him. I mean, he had quietly 700 yards, and he had that, I think, 2 years in a row, something close to that. They drafted Justice Hill. He's there as well. And they don't pass the ball a lot in Baltimore. I thought you wanted pass catchers, right? That was the big thing. And we look at Mark Ingram. He had 26 receptions last year on 29 targets. Justice Hill is a good pass catcher. They only had 440 attempts as a team last year. And I don't think that number is going to get huge, 550, 600, like some of these teams that get those huge 70, 80, 90 reception running backs. And with Dobbins' skill set, I don't know that he's going to be a guy that's going to pound it between the tackles for 250 carries. So he might be a guy that gets 150 carries, maybe 40 to 50 receptions. And is that really going to be a high-end RB1?
Garrett, what do you think?
So I get your concerns, but you know, Matt mentioned it. The fit with the Baltimore offense is incredible. We also have to factor in the efficiency of this offense. This is a very efficient offense. They are revolutionizing how you play offense in the NFL. And so to have a guy that you're going to be able to sit next to, a quarterback that's what is he, 24, 25,
22
at best? What is he?
22.
Okay, so even younger.
22, maybe 23.
Okay, so he'll be 23 at the start of next season. So, you know, he's young, and he's already able to be that efficient. And teams are starting to realize – they're not starting to realize. They've realized it for a while that the way to stop Baltimore is to stop Lamar Jackson. So the more – and I remember even playing linebacker. You know, we have different keys and different things that we have to focus on, specifically in the option game. You're the type of guy that you change how you do some of that stuff and change what some of your keys are for Lamar Jackson. That's only going to make J.K. Dobbins' job even easier. So, yes, maybe he won't see – I think you're a little on the low side as far as number of touches. I do think he'll get closer to that 200 carries per season. He might not be the 300 carries that we see out of some of these other guys, but I think he's more in the 200 carries because he's going to get 12 or so a game. I think he's going to be uber efficient on those carries. We're looking at 5+ yards per carry type of guy.
So the 2018 Chiefs offense was better than the 2019 Chiefs offense, even though they won the Super Bowl, right? Mahomes was insane, 50 touchdowns, all that kind of stuff, right? Before that, it was the Rams. Before that, it was the Eagles. All these offenses get figured out.
Sure.
The Ravens offense in the playoffs has been sputtering. Same with the Texans. Do we think that the defensive coordinators aren't going to scheme their way, personnel their way into hindering this rushing offense? That's just a general question before we get into Dobbins.
For sure. They'll definitely improve on that. You know, you're right. That's happened with all of these teams, but we still saw that when the Chiefs offense is functioning the way it's supposed to, it's still killer and dynamic. I think that will still be the way with the Ravens offense as well. I think when it's functioning the way it's supposed to, especially during the regular season, because I don't really care about the playoffs. Like that has no factor in fantasy football. You know, during the course of the regular season, I think it's going to be just fine. It's not going to be the MVP type numbers every single year for Lamar Jackson. Those numbers will decrease some, but it's going to be because the defenses are keying on him, which will open up running lanes for J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, and I mean, you can only have, with his frame, you can only have a running quarterback be a running quarterback for so long before it takes a toll on them, and then they no longer help your football team. So they have to protect Lamar Jackson. It's easy to do that when you're 22 years old, but when you start to get that 25, 26 years old, they're going to be dumping that ball off and doing some screens to J.K. Dobbins, or just making sure J.K. Dobbins gets his carries. So, of course, anytime you study a team long enough, definitely within the division, you're going to figure out how to stop that specific player or scheme. So, we'll see how long it can go for.
What's the ceiling of receptions you guys see?
Ceiling?
Or what are you guys anticipating
50,
for receptions?
50 would be ceiling. 40 would be what I expect.
Okay. So it's lower than what I thought you guys would say.
I mean, he's only like in college, he's catching about 25 balls per year. And I could definitely see him being used more than that in the NFL. I think,
right.
Obviously. So 40 sounds pretty reasonable.
And definitely with the receiving core right now, it's not like they have tons of offensive weapons out there. And that's even Lamar Jackson's game. Like he wants everything short and underneath for him as well. So I think if they can utilize J.K. Dobbins' strength, which is him in space, to get him out in space and get the ball in his hands, I think it's just a great thing for J.K. Dobbins' fantasy value and actually the Ravens as well. And just another different way to protect Lamar Jackson.
Right. But I mean, that's why they drafted Justice Hill too, though. So I'm just poking holes in this like perfect offense where it's like they haven't utilized a running back to catch a ton of balls or to get 250 carries yet in this offense. Now, again, that's a 1-year sample size, but I just don't know what they envision. Could they evolve it? Sure.
I think what they envision, Nick, is kind of like what we thought they envisioned when they took Justice Hill. Like we kind of liked that Dynasty Nerds them taking Justice Hill because we thought they were looking to go speed and open everything up wide. And it's more of an indication on Justice Hill not performing, which is why they went the route of J.K. Dobbins, because Justice Hill wasn't giving them what they wanted and they envisioned an offense. So that's where they went to. They went to J.K. Dobbins thinking, okay, J.K. Dobbins, we get the ball with him in space. With the way he can get north and south, east and west on a dime like that, and his lateral agility is something we're looking for in this offense. We see it with Marquise Brown. We see it with Lamar Jackson. So I think it's a pretty good fit. Even in Devin Duvernay, the guy they just drafted, Devin Duvernay is kind of like a Deebo Samuel-esque kind of receiver. Speed, get the ball in his hands. He turns into a running back. Could be efficient. I look at this offense, I see Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, Marquise Brown, and Devin Duvernay. I see speed and guys that could make things happen with the ball in their hands.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. It just takes that 1/2 a second of hesitation on the defensive player's part. If they're just taking their eyes off the running back for 1/2 a second to look to see if it's the quarterback that's going to take the ball, and then J.K. Dobbins, that's all he needs, you know what I mean, in order to make what would be a 2 or 3 yard grinded out play into a big chunk play. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference I see.
I mean, if they evolve it the way you're talking, Rich, to where it's more of like they'd have both sides of the tackle and they're trying to hit outside with speed, I can see it a little bit more. What I have seen is like almost like a dive or like a midline, where it's Gus Edwards, it's Mark Ingram, and they're kind of hitting the center of the defense when everyone else is worried about Jackson going outside. I don't think that's Dobbins' forte, but I mean, I can see him being solid. I just don't know that I see him as a top 5 back.
Well, here's the thing, we're assuming that J.K. Dobbins is an upgrade on Mark Ingram, right? And Mark Ingram was running back 11 last year. Like that's got to be Dobbins' floor.
5 yards a carry, 10 touchdowns. Those are some high numbers to efficiency wise, right? To maintain.
Right. But I'm saying like he's a superior athlete. Even when they were coming out, he would be a superior athlete to Mark Ingram. He's never been a physical specimen by any means. And 30-year-old Mark Ingram, like he's definitely an upgrade there.
Right.
It comes down to fantasy potential, and J.K. Dobbins will get 2,000 yards for Ohio State in that same kind of offensive system. I'm really excited to see it. Again, we're splitting hairs because all 4 of these running backs are great. Just you have to rank them, right? You have to take one or the other. So we can say we have the same argument.
Someone had to take the other side of this Ohio State love fest, okay?
You got that right.
You know what, Nick? I had your back earlier, man. I had your back.
Next on the board, we have a selection. John DeMent is on the board. He makes a very rational pick here, a very safe pick, a good pick. He takes Justin Herbert of the LA Chargers. Again, this is a super flex league, and where Herbert's not in the same tier of quarterbacks as Tua and Burrow, he's still a big athletic quarterback that we could argue goes into the absolute best situation amongst these quarterbacks when it comes to weapons, having Hunter Henry, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. I mean, Austin Eckler is almost 1,000-yard receiver. And what does a rookie quarterback helps out? What helps out a rookie quarterback a ton? We can just dump off that football to that running back. And if Austin Eckler's going to get 900 yards, that's 900 more passing yards for Justin Herbert in his rookie year. So in a super flex league, I love Justin Herbert here. I think this is right around where if he went from 3, which is where I would take him, to 5, I'm okay with that. Because if you desperately need a running back, I can see you taking Jonathan Taylor. I can see you taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm not going to kill you for it. It's just when you have an opportunity to get these young quarterbacks, like we said before, you just have to grab them, because even if you don't need them, they're worth in trade bait down the road. Even if you get a package deal, that quarterback is like, hey, I'll give you this car seat. I'm like, well, what else you have to go with it? And then you roll out Justin Herbert. It's like, it's a brand new Ferrari. You're like, yeah, I'll make the deal all of a sudden. So to me, this is a very logical pick. Matt, what do you think of Justin Herbert here as the player and the pick?
I think he's a lovely car seat. No, I think he's great, man. I just
buckle up.
It's a great spot for him. He gets to stay there on the West Coast, which, who knows if that has any bearing on it at all. But a West Coast guy gets to stay out there west. And the landing spot with the Keenan Allen, the Mike Williams, the Hunter Henry, I think, I don't think you sold that quite hard enough for another weapon that really helps out a young quarterback is a guy like a tight end just going kind of over the middle with really soft hands and an ability to get open. Not to mention Keenan Allen, is another underneath guy that just wins and you're able to just kind of throw it up to him. So I love the landing spot for Justin Herbert. At this point in the draft, there's no reason not to take him at number 5.
Yeah, I don't mind it. Herbert rose towards the end of my film study of him. It's a good spot, as you guys are saying. I don't want him to get rushed into it, so I hope they do play Tyrod some. I think they need to – he's a guy that constantly is going to need weapons around him, but he has them now. So whenever Keenan Allen's going to be done, I think they're going to need to really surround him. But I mean, think of Eckler. Herbert, his first issue when I studied him was pocket presence and his second read, and he was just dumping to the back. Well, he do that here. It's a win-win for everybody. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good spot, and plus he can run the ball. That's the other thing you got to think about. He's a really athletic guy that's going to get some points on the ground. He's not afraid to do it either.
Yeah, it's kind of why I was big on Daniel Jones last year. People were just underrating his overall athleticism when he get you on the ground. And now Daniel Jones, again, for where he went last year in Superflex leagues, his value has skyrocketed since then. And I'm looking for the same thing with Justin Herbert. Matt, you had a good take. Nick, you had a good take. I guess we'll let Garrett have a take.
So with Justin Herbert, he actually reminds me fantasy production-wise, I think we could see a lot of similarities to Josh Allen. You have a big, strong arm. You're an athletic guy that's going to get more rushing yards than people expect. I will say overall, though, if we're talking about risk, he is the riskiest quarterback of all of these guys. Watching him play, there were some inconsistencies in his games. Some times where, he would look like a world beater. And then there would be other times where he would throw multiple interceptions, especially late in games, where you're like, what were you looking at there? Like, what were you reading there? So, yes, I would make this pick as well. And I would even consider it even as high as, 3 and 4. But I will say, of all of these picks, he might be, other than one other guy we'll talk about coming up at pick 8 here, he might be the highest risk-reward guy of all of them.
Agree. I'm on the clock next, and I'm sitting here at 6, and I can't believe my eyes. To me, if this was the NFL draft, I'd be rushing to the podium with my card. ESPN would be mad because, wait, we got to kill this 15 minutes for advertising. And I'd be screaming, no, I'm taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you nerds. And this is my selection. To me, this is a clear slam dunk pick. Don't get your hopes up, viewers, because odds of him being here 6 in your leagues are probably slim to none. I've already done 7 actual rookie mock drafts, and I've seen Clyde Edwards in Superflex leagues go as high as 2 and not past 4 at all. Everybody's taking him ahead of Herbert right now. So to me, we've already done the Clyde Edwards argument, essentially, or at least I did. I think his floor is so safe, and I think his ceiling is top 4 fantasy running backs for about 6 years worth of production, which, again, that's the kind of play. He's the kind of player that you get and you go trade for a Daniel Jones, you go get a Jared Goff, you can go get a Baker Mayfield with the caliber player that Clyde Edwards could turn into. You know what I mean? And the one mistake I don't want to make here is for the people like where Nick had Jonathan Taylor is we go back to that year where it was Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey, right? Leonard Fournette, the big, powerful running back, wasn't really viable in the passing game, but man, was he a very good running back. And then you had Christian McCaffrey, the really good pass catcher running back. We don't know how much he'll do on the ground, but we know he's capable. And now Christian McCaffrey is the 1-1 in dynasty startup leagues. And Leonard Fournette is getting talked about how he sleeps in meetings and team doesn't even want him there anymore. And Christian McCaffrey is the highest paid running back in history. I can assume you guys all like this pick here at 6. Garrett, we'll let you go first because you need it.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have basically been trying to, you might as well be a 3-person show. I do. I really like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Very justifiable as the top running back on the board. For him to be the 3rd running back off the board, I can get why you would be excited. I would be the same. I would strongly consider him over Herbert. I'd probably consider taking him over Dobbins as well. Like I said, Jonathan Taylor is my top running back, so he would move all the way up to 4 for me. So I think you got easily a 2-round or a 2-pick value on where he should be. So if that happens in any of your real drafts, I also have not seen that yet. But if it happens in any of your real drafts, you're going to be absolutely thrilled. It's a slam dunk pick. He's going to be an RB1 right out of the gate and should be for the foreseeable future.
Matt?
Yeah, I don't have much to add, man. I love the pick. At this point in the draft, there's no reason not to take him. He's my number 1 running back. So I would have taken him above guys that have already gone off the board.
And Nick, quick again.
I don't know if I take him here. I'm kidding. I want to say this, okay? Clyde Edwards-Helaire was in my tier 1 before all of this. Garrett knows this. People that bought my publication know this. I'm a huge fan. I own him in the only league that I had a draft before the NFL draft. So, yeah, I'm a big fan. And he landed in a great spot.
And getting 6, like I said, it's just if this was a real draft, I'd be so excited. I wouldn't even be able to stand up on camera right now because we had to change the rating of the show. So, let's move on to pick number 7. We have Gage on the clock here, and he takes Jerry Jeudy. So we have our first wide receiver off of the board. Jerry Jeudy, the Denver Broncos, probably the best route runner in his class, goes to a very good situation. Talk about Superflex League, somebody that gets an uptick. Drew Lock, now with Melvin Gordon, Noah Fant, Cortland Sutton, and now you add Jerry Jeudy into the mix. I think this is a very nice situation for Jeudy. He offsets Cortland Sutton pretty nicely here. Matt, what do you think of Jerry Jeudy in Denver?
I mean, I like the landing spot. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy's a really one of those almost bulletproof type of prospects. The one trepidation I have here with the pick is Cortland Sutton. There's Noah Fant. There's a lot of other players and mouths to feed there. Not to mention Melvin Gordon going there as well. So it's going to be a slow burn, I think, before you're getting a ton of production out of a guy like Jerry Jeudy, who potentially could have gone, I think, to a better spot for his fantasy production. So for me, Nick, this is just a bit high for me.
Nick?
Yeah, a lot of what Matt said. I mean, also KJ Hamler. They got Albert O. I won't even pronounce that one. I could if I wanted to, but
no, you couldn't. Prove it. Prove it.
Let's see.
Off memory.
Quadavedo? Wait, no, that's not right.
That's not even close.
Okwa. I can't think of it right now. Anyway,
yeah,
I had it down. I had it down pre-draft. But they're telling a story in Denver. That's the thing. And I just put out a tweet before we started the podcast of basically just like, you need to cut bait on Bayshon Hamilton, whatever people are hyping him up, because my boy Cortland Sutton is the wide receiver 1 there. Jeudy will be 2. Hamler's going to take the top off, and they're going to have some package plays for him. You have Fant. You have Albert O. You have Melvin. We can't forget about Lindsey either. I mean, they're just loaded, and it's like they're all going to eat into each other. So, like as Matt's saying, you might want to take Jeudy down. He might have a really slow start to his career. It might be 4th season before he has a breakout maybe. And I think until then, you could acquire him much more cheaper. Owners get frustrated, things like that. So he's not my wide receiver 1. I understand some people really like his game, but I think that, they think back to the Blitnikoff year versus this last year and kind of what's happened in his landing spot.
Garrett?
Yeah, we're 3 for 3 on this. I can think of at least 2 receivers that I would want more and a running back that I would want more at this point. And so I think this was just just kind of a reach. Sometimes you got to get your guy, but there's also opportunities to take the best player available on the board. And I don't think this was a case, even if you just wanted to argue that he was the best player regardless of landing spot, I don't even think that's true. So then plus a kind of a downtick in a landing spot overall, he'll be a good NFL player. I just don't know that he's going to be a good fantasy player. So I wouldn't have made this selection personally.
Yeah, I think we're 4-4 here too, because he is not my number one receiver either. I think the one pro you can sit here when it comes to fantasy production, I think if you're looking for best case scenario, is saying that Cortland Sutton's going to see the number one cornerback on here, and Jerry Jeudy's route running is so good and savvy enough where he might not be a high fantasy guy just because he's not going to score a lot of touchdowns, but he's still going to catch about 85, 90 footballs for 1,100 yards and be that high-end wide receiver too, almost somewhat like a kind of a Stephon Diggs for the Denver Broncos.
Hey, Garrett.
You had something to chime in there?
Yeah. Okwabunam. Okay. Eat it.
That's about 8 syllables too late, Nick.
One other thing that I do wonder about is who's going to play the slot there? Is Jeudy going to get to play the slot? Or are they going to make him line up outside and put Hamler in the slot? Because I don't see Hamler being an outside receiver. So one of those guys is going to lose some value there unless they're running 4 wide receiver sets.
What about Fant outside, though? Fant can play on the outside, and he has.
It's true, but still, that means one of those guys is either off the field. Said unless you're running 4, like you're running that spread, it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out.
We might see situations where they have Lindsey and Melvin Gordon on the field, and they move Melvin Gordon out to the slant a lot as well.
Or if they love Albert O, they could run 12 personnel.
And Albert O's already got that connection with Drew Lock, his former quarterback at Missouri.
I'm not saying it, Nick. I know better. I know I can't.
Okwabunam. Come on, boys.
Okay, no.
Let's move on to our number 8 overall pick. It was Phil Pennington on the board. He takes Cam Akers. And like I said, or Garrett said, with a lot of risk involved here in Justin Herbert, this is one of the most high-risk, high-reward players in here. The former high school quarterback Cam Akers for Florida State goes from one terrible offensive line to another not-so-good offensive line there for the Chargers, or the Rams, I'm sorry. But the one thing I'll say about Cam Akers, and I feel good about taking Cam Akers here, and I'm really ecstatic about his upside, is the Rams, this was their first pick in the draft, and they have some needs, and they utilized it on the running back position. They took him over J.K. Dobbins, and what that tells me is Sean McVay, who I think we all agree is a pretty smart head coach in the NFL, saw Cam Akers as a better running back for his scheme and his system than J.K. Dobbins. Matt, you mentioned on the podcast where was Todd Gurley until Sean McVay showed up, right? A lot of us were considering him somewhat of a bust because Jeff Fisher was just running him to the ground. Sean McVay comes in, and he's the number 1 overall dynasty player. Matt, what do you think of Cam Akers out there in L.A.?
I mean, so pre-draft, this was one of these guys where I didn't like him a lot. I didn't like what I saw on tape a lot, but I do give him a slight bump due to the landing spot, due to the creativity of the coach and his ability to manufacture touches for guys and put guys into good situations on the field. This is one of those rare situations where I'm going to kind of bump a guy up in my rankings due to where he landed and the coach that he landed with. I have enough faith in Sean McVay that I feel good about that. I would not take him here. This is still too high for me. If you're looking for a running back, and at this point in the draft, all 4 of those other guys are gone, it's going to be a risky pick, but I still think he's the pick.
And it's safe to say, too, right here around 8, you're most likely a team that made the playoffs, first eliminated. Maybe it's because you needed a running back, and that's why. And these are the teams where you start making some of those riskier picks because you're going for it, right? You're not in rebuild mode. This is your actual pick. You're a playoff team, and you need that production where, hey, I like Jalen Reagor more, or I like CeeDee Lamb more, but, I need a running back, and I'm going for it here. Nick, what do you think of Cam Akers here? I know you're a little bit bullish on him pre-draft because you just don't like the progression that he's made over these last couple of years at Florida State as a true runner. But now that being said, what do you think of him going to L.A. with that draft capital and Sean McVay believing in him enough to take him above the running backs that he did?
So I won't talk a ton about tape then. I think it's the worst landing spot that Cam Akers could have went because their offensive line was 31st in PFF ranking last year. Towards the end of 2018, they were bad. So right when Gurley started taking that huge drop-off is right when that offensive line took a big drop-off. And what's happened there? Lots of injuries. When they have invested in players, they haven't really paid off. This offseason, they have literally not acquired one offensive lineman besides the 7th round this year, which is whatever that is. They re-signed their 39-year-old left tackle, who's their best player. The other 4 spots are up for grabs. They essentially are hoping some development happens from guys that haven't done it, or they stay healthy, which hasn't happened either, behind a line that hasn't done it for a year and a half. That sounds like a mess. And they went out and they got a running back. They got another receiver. They got a 3rd tight end. To me, they're just being ignorant and neglecting their offensive line because that's what's made them. When you want to look at when they were good, they had a good O-line. Jared Goff could hand it to Gurley or do the play action and hit guys deep on crossers. And they could do all that stuff. When that O-line isn't intact, they had to keep tight ends in. They had to really, really help him and support that passing game. And so the rushing lanes aren't there. And Akers isn't good at his approach to line of scrimmage, reading defenses, adjusting. He's better when there is a designed hole and it's there for him. He's not a nuanced runner yet. And so when you want to combine those things, plus their post-draft conference, he didn't say that he's going to be the 3-down guy. He said he thought he was too good of a value and he's going to help that running back room. And it's really going to be an open competition. Darrell Henderson, I don't think he lived up to expectations last year, but he's really talented. We can't say he's not a talented guy. He's a good pass catcher, right? And so, well, he's a good pass catcher. He's athletic, right? And so he's a better pass catcher than Cam Akers is. He's faster than Cam Akers. And so right there, you're like, well, if he's not going to catch the ball 60, 70 times, right? We just talked about how important that is. If the offensive line's not good, I don't see a huge potential here at all. And even Malcolm Brown is there. We're not even talking about him, and he's not a bad back.
No, he's not. I'm not really big on Darrell Henderson. I wasn't big on him last year. I was telling all our audience not to draft him. Everybody was taking him in the 1st round. I was like, don't be a silly Billy and go out there and get some Darrell Henderson. And I think with the offensive line, maybe another reason they got Cam Akers was because he's probably one of the best pass protection running backs out there too. I mean, he's absolutely fantastic in pass protection. Garrett, last guy on Cam Akers. Want to give us a little hot take on there?
No, I'm not quite as negative as Nick on it.
Nobody is, Garrett. Nobody is.
But I'm in the same line of thinking. I'm not huge on the landing spot for him either. I actually have a running back over him, which I know a lot of people have Cam Akers as their 5th. I have a guy that I have over him, and I don't think we're going to get to it this episode, but next episode we shall. But
boy, Garrett.
What's that? That's
My
right.
Boy.
Would we have the same guy?
Of course we do.
In sync there? Bye. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Yeah, I do like the potential that Cam Akers has just as an athlete. But that's really what we have to view him as right now is we have to view him as an athlete. And so Sean McVay has a lot of work to do to get him into a good running back. I'm really, really concerned about that offensive line. I would have much rather than seen them go offensive line with both their picks in the 2nd round and then take a running back in the 3rd. I would have felt significantly better about whoever that running back was. I just think it's a really poor offensive line. And we already know that he's going to have flashbacks from his days at FSU, and that's going to be real frustrating real quick.
Moving on, next pick in the draft as we get to number 9 overall, and that's Ethan Wyatt. He takes CeeDee Lamb, who went to the Dallas Cowboys. This is great value, and this is why Superflex is so great. You're getting guys, and it shows the depth of this draft class. And wait till you guys turn into the next episode where we're doing 2nd round. You're going to be like, I can't believe these guys are here in the 2nd round. CeeDee Lamb, some people might envision this as a bad landing spot. I think it's an absolute fantastic landing spot for him. Jerry Jones did what every NFL GM should do. Take the best player available, even if it's not a huge position of need. They had Michael Gallup there. They had Amari Cooper. They agreed to pay $20 million a year to. They got Zeke Elliott. They're a run-first team. But listen, Michael Gallup was able to be wide receiver 23 last year. And CeeDee Lamb is leaps and bounds better than Michael Gallup. He is my number 1 receiver in this class. He's one of the most effective receivers with the ball in his hands. Amari Cooper is going to take all that quarterback 1 coverage his way for at least a year. And it's just to open things up for CeeDee Lamb. He's dynamic. He's effective on all 3 levels of the field. He can go up there and get the ball just as good as anybody. His hands are good. Yards after the catch. I love it. I love this relationship he's going to have with Dak Prescott for long term. I see Amari Cooper just getting that guaranteed money in Dallas, and he's going to get out of the way. They're going to push CeeDee Lamb all the way to his 5th-year option, and then they'll pay CeeDee Lamb to be that number 1 guy. I love this landing spot. Garrett, what do you think of CeeDee Lamb in Dallas?
I think this is a great spot too. this was one of the few guys where my initial reaction was not the same as my final thought on this. Because at first I was like, oh, man, like that. There's a lot of other spots I would have, I don't know. And then the more I like sat down and thought about it, I was like, well, Amari Cooper's got an out in 21. And, it takes some time for these guys to develop anyway. It's becoming a higher passing volume team anyway. I like Kellen Moore. I like him as an offensive coordinator. So I think it's a very good landing spot. You might have to temper expectations on the ceiling for the first couple seasons, but long term, I mean, this guy could end up being the Devontae Adams, the DeAndre Hopkins that we kept comping him to. He's in an offense that could develop him into that guy. So I think it's a very good selection at 9, and there is a very high ceiling long term for CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, and some people might sit here and think, hey, this isn't a great spot, which it is. Don't let that happen to it because this CD is going to turn into a Blu-ray, I promise. This is a great spot for him. I think it's great. I think he's going to produce long-term. Again, we played Dynasty. He's the number 1 receiver on the board. Matt, what do you think of CeeDee Lamb?
CeeDee who? I mean, I love the spot. I don't think he's ever going to turn into a Blu-ray, but I do like the spot long term. Obviously, it's going to take a couple of years. Mentioned it last night on the podcast, but like you guys are saying, there's an out for Amari Cooper. There's a clear path for him to become the guy there in a couple of years. It's just going to take that time, and you're going to have to be patient with him. But the wide receiver position, it's a long-term game anyway. You're looking for these guys to produce on your fantasy team for 8-10 years, especially for a guy of CeeDee Lamb's caliber. So I'm totally there. You should, he's my number 1 guy still after the draft from the wide receiver position. So at this point in the draft, this is crazy value for me. And that's like you said, this is what's so fantastic about Superflex and what makes these drafts so fun.
And that's the nuts and bolts of it when we're talking about CD2, Matt. You mentioned this is long-term play. One of the worst decisions you can make for your dynasty is looking for the player that can help you right now the most instead of the best talent possible. Just like I mentioned what Jerry Jones did here, he took the best player on the board. When you're in your rookie draft, you need to take the best player on the board, even if you're low to that position, because all that's going to do, you have a ton of receivers. Well, guess what? Now you're in a position to say, okay, I don't have to trade CeeDee Lamb, but now I can trade one of my proven receivers because I believe in CeeDee Lamb for that running back I love. Instead of taking the risk on Cam Akers, why don't just you take CeeDee Lamb, you take a proven receiver you got, and go get the proven running back that you like a lot, or get a package deal, or maybe get another draft pick. It's dynasty. You got to make the smart moves for long-term success, and that's what we're looking for. Not a quick fix. We're looking for long-term sustained success to build that roster. And the more you do that as well, the more often you're going to find these rookie drafts, you don't even have to think about it because you don't have a lot of holes because you put yourself in the best position. Nick, let's round that up on CeeDee Lamb with your take.
Yeah, big fan of CeeDee Lamb. Still wide receiver 1 for me. I had the same reaction that Garrett did where I was like, oh, great for the NFL team. How about that fantasy value? Because I own him in some leagues already from Debbie. But the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. As in all the reasons you guys said, after some research, he actually has the most vacated targets available to him of the top rookie pass catchers. So there could be more of a 2020 value there than we're actually seeing. My biggest worry is Dak Prescott signing there long-term? If he is, I'm great. It's money. Things are good. If not, they're going to bring somebody in. Are they going to stink? Is it going to be like Drew Lock? That's where the worry comes in for me.
Okay. We all like CeeDee Lamb here. So moving on to the next pick, Garrett Price is on the clock. Just like I couldn't stand up earlier, you probably would have trouble standing up in this situation as well, just because sitting there at number 10, you made a fantastic selection and getting DeAndre Swift at 110. Unbelievable. Detroit Lions running back. This guy was my 1-1 at running back for 2 years straight until this weekend. And for you to get him at 110 in the draft, I would have said, oh, man, he must have got drafted by, like, the Cowboys. Like, what's going on here? But he does go to Lions. Garrett, tell us your instant reaction here about getting DeAndre Swift at 10 in this mock draft.
Knowing that I had the 10 spot, I was already trying to think through, okay, Jalen Reagor could be there. Keyshawn Vaughn could be there. Michael Pittman. Like, what am I going to do? And then it comes to me, and I wasn't even paying attention to the few picks before me. And I look, and I was like, wait, has this not refreshed? Like, wait, DeAndre Swift's here at 10. I'm at pick 10 and DeAndre Swift's here. Like it made no sense in the world to me. And I just said, thank you. I just said, thank you. And I took him. DeAndre Swift, for people that are telling you that this is a horrible, atrocious landing spot, that's not true. Is it the perfect scenario that we got for Dobbins and CEH and Jonathan Taylor? No, it's not that tailor-made position. But compared to most seasons where we see a lot of these guys land in the second and third round when we're like, oh, that's the landing spot, this is still a decently favorable landing spot. I know a lot of people like Kerryon Johnson. I've never been quite as high on him. I think he's a fine player, but dude can't stay healthy. And Patricia didn't draft him. And I think at this point, they're going to have Swift as their 1A pretty dang quick. Kerryon might still be involved. He might be used a little bit here between the tackles or on third down or whatever, but it's going to be DeAndre Swift's job. And also there's this narrative that Matthew Stafford doesn't want to throw to the running back. Well, in 2018, and I wasn't able to find the number for 2019, but in 2018, he threw to the running back 22.6% of the time. That was fourth in the NFL. So he has no problem checking it down to his running back. So, when we were talking earlier about guys that can catch the ball and run the ball, he is going to have plenty of opportunity, especially long-term, once Kerryon's not there anymore, to get a good bulk of those receptions. He could be another one of those 60, 65, 70 catches per season type guy.
And not even when not Kerryon's there, maybe when we're not Matt Patricia's not even there, because he's also part of the issue there as well, which why they kind of took a step back from throwing a running back there. What do you think of DeAndre Swift in Detroit, Nick?
Yeah, no, I like it way more than people are really just talking it down. I mean, they had the 11th ranked offensive line according to PFF last year. No one talks about that. They were just injured. Kerryon Johnson is trying to play like he's in high school and running over everybody. And guess what? It doesn't work and you get hurt. And he's been hurt 2 straight years. A few years ago when they had someone like Theo Riddick, he got tons of receptions. They have nobody else. They have Galladay. Maybe Hawkinson will develop. Marvin Jones. It's been fun with all these bombs and this amazing efficiency. It's not going to last. I mean, he's already 30, 31. So there's going to be a hole there where someone's going to need to fill it. I could see him being a guy like McCaffrey, where he gets so many receptions because they have to give it to somebody, and there's nobody else that's there. And Stafford's talented too. That's the other thing where he's a guy that can put it into good areas for him to get yak, to get touchdowns. So I think it's a better spot than people want to talk about. And they're not a great team, so he's going to get a lot of dump offs, and he's going to
garbage
points. So
and Stafford was on his way to a great year last year before he got hurt. I mean, he's having one of the best years of his career, and like Nick said, DeAndre Swift, I mentioned earlier, we were talking about Jonathan Taylor, is extremely efficient. If you look at his pass catching stats out of Georgia, they're not like exorbitant. They're not like huge, but he's very efficient when he did get the ball. Very crisp route runner, really good with the ball in his hands. In the open field, dude, he flashes that leg to the outside and makes those defenders go one way while he goes the other. Again, this is dynasty, so it's not about just what he can do this year. It's about how he's going to be long-term. And I like how you said Christian McCaffrey, where even Theo Riddick at that small period of time in there was like a running back too, just kind of pass catching ability. You can never underestimate the PPR running backs and their value. They're the one guys that are consistently in those running back top 24 year in, year out, where you see those guys who are predominant just rushers. You see them like a roller coaster where they finish up and down. Matt, what do you think of DeAndre Swift in Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this was a guy that I had. He was my top-rated running back before the process. But he's going to take a little bit of a bump naturally because these other guys landed in such favorable positions and he's just not in an immediately favorable position. You know what I mean? I think he's talented enough. He's more talented than Kerryon Johnson, obviously. It's not going to take him long to get ahead of him on the depth chart, but there's still a lot of uncertainty with that whole coaching staff, how long they're going to be there. And I just don't like the fact that this is a guy that could possibly be getting turned over to another coaching staff relatively soon because you never know who gets lost in the shuffle. I do think he's talented enough that he won't be one of those guys. If he doesn't produce right away or if he gets nicked up like Kerryon Johnson did, he could be a guy that falls on the wayside in one of these regime changes. So there's just enough uncertainty that I bumped him down my list a few spots. But at this point in the draft, this is amazing value. And if you're getting DeAndre Swift at number 10 in the Superflex, you're doing it right.
I have 2 other quick things. One is The RB by committee has been the biggest issue. You hear that all the time. All they do is a committee. All they do is a committee. Well, he's the most talented guy they've had in a while. I had somebody on Twitter talk about whoever they picked in the 6th round, the running back that's like a special teamer or whatever. And that's evidence is why it's going to be RB by committee. I'm like, if you think that guy getting drafted there is the reason why Swift is going to be in a committee, you're overthinking it. I'm like, you have to also think that Rodney Anderson and Travion Williams are why Joe Mixon wasn't going to get touches last year. We overthink things so much. Teams make decisions to win football games, and so they can keep their job. They're not drafting Swift to split carries with the 6th rounder. I'm sorry. You are way overanalyzing things. The other thing is this. We talked about it before the draft. Rich and Matt, did you guys get to see DeAndre Swift's dad doing the workouts?
We did. Our last, if you look at our last YouTube video that we did before the workout, we have actually a video of his biceps on the actual YouTube video. So you can check that out. We did a 1-round rookie 1 QB mock draft before there. Make sure you check that out on our YouTube channel. It's another perk of subscribing and liking the channel as you get all our mock drafts and all our rookie content, all our buys, all our sells. Let's move on to our next pick, number 11. Matt O'Hara is on the clock. If you are familiar with the YouTube channel, if you are familiar with the Dynasty Nerds podcast, you know exactly where this pick is going. He's moving on up to the east side. Matt O'Hara is on the clock. Where do you go, Matt, with this pick, number 111? I'm not even going to announce it. I'm going to let you announce it.
Oh, give me some Justin Jefferson, number 11. I can't believe he fell this far. Oh, my gosh. No, in all certainty, this was the guy I had. You all right, Nick? This is the guy I had, as my second-rated wide receiver above JEUDY before the draft. And then obviously he gets picked here in the 1st round. And I love the landing spot there with the Vikings. Obviously, Adam Thielen is going to be the guy there, the number 1 target for the next couple of years. But Stephon Diggs, obviously went out via trade this past offseason as well, went over to the Bills. So there are, I think it was 93 targets that vacated just from him alone. So Justin Jefferson is going to be a nice guy that's just going to be able to slide right into those particular targets and absorb a lot of that early. But really, he's going to be able to ease his way into being the number 1 option as a wide receiver as Adam Thielen kind of finds his way out. I think he's 29 right now. He'll be 30 in August. So he's got a couple years probably left of pretty decent production where they'll kind of be able to switch roles in the next couple of years, and he'll end up being the number 1 guy where Adam Thielen kind of becomes the second option in the offense there as a wide receiver.
Gary, what do you think of Justin Jefferson in Minnesota?
I'm not as high on Justin Jefferson. I think we've established this before. I will say at pick 11, I don't have any issue with it. It might not have necessarily been my pick, but I think this is the right range for him to go in. So on the whole, I'm okay with it. Overall in Minnesota, though, I just don't think it's as juicy of a landing spot as other people think it is. We have the Minnesota Vikings offense, which last year was 30th in pass attempts. So pretty dang low in the pecking order. It's not a priority for them. I know Kubiak and Stefanski, but Kubiak was a main cog in that offense with Kevin Stefanski even before. So he's a disciple of his. I don't think it's going to change much. On top of that, you have Justin Jefferson was most effective when he was running out of the slot position. Well, Adam Thielen was also most effective when he was running out of the slot position, which he did 52% of the time in 17 and 18, which were Thielen's most productive seasons. We also have the fact that there will be a lot of times where neither one of them get to run out of the slot position because of how much 12 personnel that they run. There was only 96 targets for Stephon Diggs last season. We have Irv Smith gaining ground. We have Olabisi getting more targets. I don't think it's bad. I just don't think it's this, oh, man, he's going to have 1,000 yards as a rookie and all these touchdowns. Like, I think it's a fine, safe landing spot, but I just don't think there's as much upside as other people do.
Nick?
Other people like who, Garrett?
I'm not going to point fingers.
The only other things I can add is that was last year. Diggs had those targets when Thielen was hurt for half the season. And so I think it's going to get cut more. I'm more, and again, I'm more down on this landing spot as well. I don't see the allure. I think he's more of just like a complementary piece to an offense, but I don't know what's going to happen there. Dalvin Cook's going to be a free agent after the year. Kirk Cousins is locked in for what I think 2 more years, I think is what the extension was.
Yeah.
So like what's going to happen? I mean, when Jefferson comes into his prime, what is that even going to look like? Rudolph's there, I think, for one more year. So there's really just so much pieces. You don't know what's going to happen, that it's tough right now in the immediate future. And I think we all agree, even Matt said this, I don't think it's going to be a great, starting point for Jefferson in terms of, he's not going to start for you. Maybe a flex, if you're low. It's going to be a 2022, 2023, I think, thing before he might be that wide receiver too, if it ever happens.
Yeah, I see. I'm a little bit towards Matt's side. I like Justin Jefferson a lot as a player. I did say I just somewhat envision him as like a really strong number 2, kind of like, Thielen and Diggs are now. But in today's NFL, I don't look at it as a bad thing because tons of offenses support 2 high productive wide receivers as it is. Mentioning what a team's going to look like a couple of years from now, we don't know what any team's going to look like for a couple of years from now. So again, I throw that out the window as well. They're probably going to lock up Dalvin Cook. That's a rumor right now out of Minnesota. They will lock him up. If Kyle Rudolph leaves, that's good because they have Irv Smith Jr. there anyways. And if Kirk Cousins leaves, you can find another slightly above average quarterback already too. So I'm not worried about that either.
Come on.
I envision Justin Jefferson as a very solid, reliable receiver. One of those guys that can give you wide receiver 16, wide receiver 18, 19 numbers year in, year out. And eventually, if he keeps growing as a receiver, to be that number 1 option in Minnesota. And then if you're the number 1 option in any offense, I mean, we saw at times when Sterling Shepard was the number 1 weapon there in New York. You could be a productive fantasy player. So I like Justin Jefferson as a player. I like the spot. Anytime you give him a receiver that plays inside a dome, that's a slight uptick for me. And again, once we get this Justin Jefferson range, it kind of becomes a hodgepodge of who do you like? Do you like Denzel Mims? Do you like Michael Pittman Jr.? Do you like T. Higgins? Almost like the top 4 running backs. There's no wrong answer significantly because they're all good players and they're all in pretty good situations. So I like the pick. Let's wrap this mock draft up with pick number 12. Marvin Eloquin is on the clock. He takes, I know, some of your guys' favorite right here in Jalen Reagor, comes away to the Eagles with first-round draft capital on a team that desperately needed a receiver. I like Jalen Reagor. I think he's a really explosive athlete. My biggest question is he a really explosive receiver? Does have some issues with drops, not the best route runner in the world, but he will most likely go in and be the number 1 receiver for the Eagles. He gets a bump no matter what for 1, draft pedigree and landing situation. Nick, I know you're a really big Jalen Reagor fan. Tell us why you like to spot with him in the Eagles.
Yeah, he rose up in my rankings after this landing spot. I mean, we talked about, AKERS going ahead of Dobbins. I mean, Reagor went ahead of Jefferson. So, I mean, they had their pick of who they wanted there, and they wanted him. I love it because, one, initially, there's going to be targets that are there for him. I mean, they were throwing to Greg Lewis last year. Let's remember this. So there's going to be targets right away. And we know Jeffrey and Jackson, they get hurt all the time, which is unfortunate for them and their end of their careers. But there's going to be spots. And with Ertz and with Goddard there, I don't think teams are going to be able to key on him. So if you want 2020 production, I think he's a sneaky flex wide receiver 3 guy, almost for sure. Because I think he's that talented. When you get paired with a really good quarterback, there's going to be some spots for him to produce. Then you have to think long term, right? I know you don't like to do this, Rich, but you look at contracts. You look at when players are coming in and coming out. The only good long-term guy that's there maybe is Goddard if they re-sign him. So, there's going to be a need there for some guy to kind of rise up. And when he develops more of the route running, as you said, more being a receiver 2 or 3 years down the line, then he's going to be that star, I think.
Gary, I know that you moved Reagor up to your number 1 overall receiver. So what do you love about Reagor here in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I have him and CD one spot apart, so it's really a 1A, 1B situation. But, when I'm on the clock and if I have the choice, 60% of the time I'm going to go with Reagor. The other 40% I'll diversify a little bit and take CD Lamb.
Being so wishy-washy, man. Come on.
I know, right? Well, at least we know for sure I don't like Jefferson, so I'm very firm on that.
Time will tell, all right? Time will tell.
No, they're both very, very talented receivers and both have very good long-term view for their career. He's also tied to Carson Wentz, who they locked up this past season for what was it? The 5 years, 6, like it was a huge contract that they signed Carson Wentz to. So I like that. I like him being in the Peterson offense, And Nick did a great job at highlighting there's just really not a lot else there to really compete for targets. And the targets that are going to be, it's going to be mostly to the tight end and then some in the backfield to Miles Sanders. So he's going to be able to get some downfield plays. And we know that he's a much better contested catch guy than his size would suggest. He's a very physical player. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. He has that NFL pedigree from his father. He's got a Philly type mentality, like city player, fit. I really like that there. So I think it's going to be a good situation long-term. I'm very excited for Jalen Reagor.
Matt, go ahead and wrap it up with your Jalen Reagor take.
Yeah, obviously a guy that has a ton of upside and is a little bit raw when you watch him on tape, like you mentioned, Rich, with his route running. He's definitely going to need some work there. But like you guys are saying, there aren't that many options there, good options there in the wide receiving room there. So it's definitely a great situation that he's landed in Philadelphia, and the upside is just too good to pass up this late in the draft. So yeah, I like the landing spot.
And there you have it, our 2020 first round rookie mock draft. If you think that was a lot of good players, wait till you check out the second round of the Superflex mock draft. Make sure you check out that video. Make sure you check out all Dynasty Nerds videos. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you get to dynastynerds.com. It's your number one resource to build in that long-term Dynasty championship. We have the most accurate rookie rankings in the business for you. So if you want to dominate your rookie draft, make sure you check out dynastynerds.com. Our Twitter handles are on the screen. If you want to hit us up on social media to talk Dynasty, we're always available. Until then, we'll talk to you next video. Thanks for watching.